Thank you all so much. You already met several of these people, I realize. Since he doesn't have anything to celebrate, please help me welcome Mr. Justin Powell on the trumpet. He has nothing to celebrate. He's a jazz trumpet player. There's nothing out there but pain. So, that first tune we played was entitled Driftin'. This is off of Herbie's first album as a leader, and his first album was actually on Blue Note. The album is called Taken Off. It was done in 1962. Herbie is 22 years old when this record comes out. He has a couple of interesting things that will put him in this position. The first of which is how he basically got the gig that got him this record deal to begin with. I did this show, this version of the show 7 years ago. So if you were here 7 years ago, you'll know this answer. If you weren't here 7 years ago, then this question will be relevant. So we'll see how many of you were here 7 years ago. Raise your hand if you know who Wally Pipp is. Okay, we got a couple, all right. So the reason most of you don't know who Wally Pipp is, Wally Pipp was an incredibly successful baseball player. He won the home run championship twice. He won the World Series with the New York Yankees. He played first base. World Series winning first baseman for the New York Yankees. Everything was going Wally's way, except one day he got sick, couldn't play. So they brought up this kid, brand new kid, right out of off the farm, basically, named Lou Gehrig, and they let him play first base. If you know anything about Lou Gehrig, you know that he never took a single day off of baseball, ever. So basically, nobody knows who Wally Pipp is. Even though he was an incredibly talented baseball player, He just happened to not quite be Lou Gehrig. And what's going to happen to Herbie is he's just hanging out in Chicago as a kid, and he gets a call because the famous Donald Byrd, great trumpet player, and basically kind of the top of the charts for Blue Note Records, he's got a gig in Chicago, which is where Herbie lives. And his band, his piano player couldn't make it to Chicago. There was a big snowstorm, and the pianist couldn't make it. So Donald called around and got this kid named Herbie Hancock to show up and play this one gig. And Herbie played the one gig, and that was it. He was gonna, no more of that. We don't even. I do know who that other pianist is. He actually went on to have a pretty successful career. He's from Atlanta. His name is Duke Pearson. That's the gig that Herbie took. A couple of years later, Duke's going to actually produce a Donald Byrd record with Herbie on it. Duke, everything went fine for Duke. He moved on to Nancy Wilson, so which particularly back then actually was a better paid gig and all of that. So yeah, Duke did just fine. However, this gig with Herbie, really started to take off. And then when Donald said, "You got to move to New York. You're doing okay here in Chicago, but I need you in New York. I think when people hear you, they're going to go nuts." So he moves to New York, and Donald starts talking to his record label. He's like, "Man, I've got this kid. He's like 21 years old. He's tearing it up. You got to sign this kid. Trust me, before it's too late." They're like, "We don't really sign kids like that. Like, we're going to give him a couple of years. We're going to let him blossom, and we'll keep an eye on him. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, if he's really doing some cool stuff, we'll sign him." And Donald's like, "You shouldn't do that." I'm like, "This is like, we should probably sign him right now." I'm like, "Yeah, no, we're good. We're going to wait, but I appreciate it, Donald." He goes, "Well, the thing is that Herbie actually got drafted, and he's heading to Korea. And so I really think what we could do is, this might be his only album. We should record an album for him, and that's a great selling point. We can say he's taken off. He's taken off to Korea, and he's going to get this one record in before he goes to Korea." And that really struck Blue Note. They said, "You know what? I think we can do that. We'll sign him to this one record, call it Taken Off. We'll see how it goes." Yeah. Now, none of that is actually true. He wasn't drafted. He wasn't heading to Korea. None of that was true. But Donald just said that to try and get Blue Note's attention. They are. Luckily, he's going to sign with Blue Note. And then Donald also gave him some great advice about how to negotiate with Blue Note. He said, listen, they're going to ask you for half of your publishing, right? And if you're not familiar, publishing is where the musicians actually make their money, right? So he says they're going to try to buy your publishing or make you publish your music through them so that they own most of it. He said, so if I were you, just tell them that you have a publishing company. So he went in there and he's like, "Hey, listen, I can't give you my publishing because I already have a publishing company." And they said, "Okay, well, that means we can't do this because the only reason we're signing you, kid, is to try and see if any of your songs go anywhere," which they probably won't. So he says, "Okay, well, then we're not going to do it." And Herbie says, he tells the story, it was like right out of a movie. He's going to the door to leave the Alfred Lyons office in Blue Note. And as soon as he touches the doorknob, he hears, "Wait." And he knows what that means. So he turns around, he goes, "All right, I know you have your own publishing company, so that's fine. We'll make it work. Well, let's just go ahead and do this record." So that, by the way, also was a lie. He did not have his own publishing company. Donald just said, "You got to do this," and then he said his second he walked out of the door from Blue Note, he went and started his own publishing company so that he could keep the rights to his music. Off of this first record, Taken Off, there's a song that he wrote about his neighborhood. Most of the music that Herbie wrote was about his own surroundings, and so his first record is mostly about his Chicago neighborhood. And there was a song on the record that was about a fruit vendor in his neighborhood that he would always hear the ladies like holler out the guy's name as he drove by to get them to stop. That tune was entitled "Watermelon Man." And Mongo Santa Maria, just about a year later, is going to record a version of it that goes gold, and 3 or 4 more people are going to do it. And if Donald Byrd didn't tell Herbie to keep his publishing, he would have lost all that money to Blue Note. So I hope Donald Byrd had a really nice house that Herbie Hancock bought for him. So
he's been sued lately for the rights to that song by some grandson of the Watermelon Man himself. The guy's Hancock stole the tune from my.
Oh, interesting. So maybe Herbie wants to give it back to Blue Note so that he sues Blue Note. He got enough out of Watermelon Man, right? Come on. So we're going to move on to his second album. His second album, which was recorded just a year later. Also, tunes on this record are going to be really about his childhood in Chicago, some of his neighborhood people that he saw in his neighborhood, kind of characters in that neighborhood. But we're going to do a tune off of that second album. It's a great tune entitled "And What If I Don't Know." And one thing I want you to try and pay attention to is how similar it is to the last song that we played. This is the classic Blue Note hard bop sound. When we think of the Blue Note sound, that last song, Drifting, and this song, And What If I Don't Know, this is exactly the kind of music that Donald Byrd was making, that Herbie was trying to emulate because it was popular. And we're going to chronicle his growth as a composer and a performer throughout his time at Blue Note. But check out how much this sounds like kind of typical, traditional Blue Note jazz. This is called And What If I Don't Know. Man, Kevin, I'm going to start sending you to weddings more often. You sound great, man.
The beer.
The beer and the empty stomach, that's the combination? Okay. Kids, don't... Exactly. So we're going to move on to a couple of the other records he did kind of in the middle periods. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about his very, very beginnings before Donald Byrd picked him up. So this is, he was about 7 years old when he kind of discovered the piano and started taking lessons, and he immediately took to it. By the age of 11, he was already, his teacher was blown away at what a great pianist he was. He was a child prodigy, and then at 11 he entered a contest with the Chicago Symphony. It was an amateur contest, and whoever won the contest got to perform a piece with the Chicago Symphony. And Herbie, at the age of 11, won that competition, which is incredible. So he wins the competition, and they select a piece for him to work on, and then he's working on it for a couple of months as they prepare for the concert. And then 2 weeks before the concert, the Chicago Symphony reaches out to Herbie and says, "Hey, listen, we've had a problem with getting all the music that we need to perform this piece for you, so we're going to have to switch the piece on you because we don't have the music. We thought we did, but we don't. So we're gonna have to switch the piece for you." Now, to tell a professional, adult professional classical pianist that we're switching the piece on you and you have 2 weeks to learn it is something that you just don't do. Like, you just cancel the piece. And the belief is that the Chicago Symphony first of all, they had never had an African American win that competition, never had an African American perform with the Chicago Symphony. So the belief is that they did this in the hopes that Herbie would cancel and say, "I can't learn another piece in 2 weeks," and they would have to cancel the competition and then redo the competition later. But instead, Herbie said, "Okay, I'll do that." And so he spent 2 weeks learning an entirely new piano concerto and played it with the Chicago Symphony at 11 years old, which is a testament to his talent. A couple of years later, he's going to enter a very different contest, and he's going to lose this contest. It's at his local high school. This is a guy who just won an entire citywide contest to play with the symphony, but he doesn't even win his own high school talent show, because the kid who won it was also a pianist, but this kid played jazz and improvised his whole solo. And Herbie just could not understand how this kid did this. So in Herbie's words, he said he locked himself in a room for the next couple of years, and he was going to figure out this jazz thing. Which I gotta say, I mean, I know there's still time left on the clock, but I'm gonna say he kind of figured it out, right? I think he's got it. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine just graduated with his doctorate at the Manhattan School of Music, and one of the people in his doctoral thing, they gave Herbie Hancock an honorary doctorate for music. So I think he did all right. So he's gonna, but he had not ever discovered jazz before, so he decided to really dig in and learn all he could to learn about it. And then when he graduated high school, he was going to college a little bit, but he really wanted to try and make it as a jazz musician, which is also, kids, terrible advice. So in order to try to support himself, once he graduated college, he did what every jazz musician is known for doing. He started working at the post office. So he's working at the post office, doing whatever you do at post offices, sort mail, I don't know. But whatever he's doing, he's post officing there. And is that a word? Is that a verb? I just conjugated post office. I don't think that, okay, I verbed that up. So, but while he's there, somebody's gonna call him and say, "Hey, Coleman Hawkins is coming through town and he needs a pianist." In another last minute situation, and Herbie went and played a night with Coleman Hawkins. And a similar situation, this happens before Donald Byrd, where Coleman is blown away by the kid and gives him lots of kudos and said, "Man, you really, please keep doing this." So he is going to quit that post office job, at least as far as last I heard. He quit the post office job, and then he's going to, go on, obviously, to become the great Herbie Hancock. So when he finished that album, the second album in 1963, he's immediately going to follow that up with another album entitled Inventions and Dimensions in that same year. So he's been with Blue Note for 2 years. He already has 3 albums out. But it's this fourth record that we start to notice a change in Herbie's playing and in his compositional techniques. This is in 1964. And the significant thing that happened to Herbie before he made this record was he got a call from Miles Davis. And when he joined Miles Davis's band, it was a very young band. It was Tony Williams on drums and Ron Carter on bass and several saxophonists, but eventually settled on the great Wayne Shorter. Now Herbie is starting to get out of his Chicago neighborhood and start to travel and talk with other artists who are at his level. And his writing style changes from just being kind of the sounds that he hears around him. Now he's trying to create new sounds. And he's going to do something really cool on this next album, which is entitled Empyrean Isles, where he's going to start basically painting sonic imagery, where he's going to try and visualize something and hope that the audience can close their eyes and visualize it, and the sounds they hear make them picture the same thing Herbie was picturing. He's still like 24 when he makes this record, by the way, which is pretty incredible. We're going to play a tune off of that record for you right now. The album is entitled Empyrean Isles, and the tune we're going to play is a great tune entitled Cantaloupe Island. And any fans of the 90s might recognize this as a sample from the hip-hop group Us Three. That's how I knew it. I was like, oh, this is really good. And then I heard Herbie Hancock play it. I was like, hey, he stole that song from those guys. Just like the guy from the Watermelon Man's grandson, right? Same thing. All right, here we go. This is Empyrean Isles and Cantaloupe Island. We might have played that a little bit more like us three and less like Herbie originally played it, but here we are. So, so that was Empyrean Isles, and I said he just started to kind of change his compositional style and starting to learn more about the sounds he can get on the piano and how much more explorative he can be. And a lot of that is going to come from his time under the great leadership of Miles Davis, who is encouraging him each night to explore, find new sounds, go into little corners of the musical world that haven't really been explored yet. And this really does wonders for Herbie's own writing and own compositional style. So we're gonna move into another step closer to that with this next record. And this is while Empyrean Isles has little bits and pieces of thematic stuff that you can kind of sew together. This next record is a concept album, and then every song on the record strings together a similar sound and really closing your eyes, putting on the record, and imagining that you are somewhere at sea. Each song on the record, there's a beautiful song, a very playful song called Dolphin Dance on this record. There's a song called The Egg. There's a lot of really cool stuff on this album. But the song that opens the album out, and it's the title track of the album that was one of his bigger hits, wasn't actually written to be on one of his Blue Note albums. He wrote it to be a commercial. It was a commercial jingle for a cologne called Yardley cologne. Anybody know what Yardley cologne originated? Okay, good. All right. So he wrote this jingle for Yardley, and it's this song, but he put it to like a rock beat, but it didn't work, and he said like it didn't go well, and he wasn't making the rock thing work out very well. Spoiler alert, he is going to figure that out at some point later here and figure out the whole jazz rock thing pretty well, but this is early on in the process. So we're going to play closer to the original way he did it. Is the very first song off of an album about being on the sea, aptly titled Maiden Voyage. y'all so much. On that same record, we were going to play a song right after that. Because that's the boat that leaves the shore, right? And then in the middle of the album, there's a song called "The Eye of the Hurricane," and it gets all crazy and intense and nuts and stuff. And we were going to do that next, but we basically already did that somewhere in the middle of Maiden Voyage, so it had already basically made that entire journey around. So we're going to skip "Eye of the Hurricane," and this is very important because John Sanford hates this song. So he is like super happy that we're not playing "Eye of the Hurricane" because it has this weird like hard part in the middle. And the thing is that we all really struggle to play the song, but we all hide it. We're always like, oh, yeah, that's cool, I can play that song. And John's always like, I don't know, I'm really struggling with this. Like, dude, you don't say that out loud. You just act cool. Like, yeah, I got this. I think that was somebody else that messed that up. It couldn't have possibly been me. Yeah. Oh, it must be my horn. So we're going to skip that tune that was entitled "Eye of the Hurricane," and we're going to move on to his last couple of records. After he did Maiden Voyage, which is in 1965, he's going to take a break from making straight-ahead albums for a minute, and he's going to try to do a full-blown venture into what he called at that time funk rock. And he's going to start trying to blend these two styles. He's actually going to write the soundtrack to a movie called "Blowin' Up," and in that score, he did all the music, but it was again, it didn't work. He wasn't happy with the results. The soundtrack was kind of weird. But one of the interesting things that did happen from that soundtrack was there's one song on there in particular that there's a bass line from it that was really cool. And again, this should have been like on the flyer to get in, that you have to have a cursory amount of 90s music trivia knowledge. So this is for my other 90s fans out there. The bass line from this was taken by and sampled by a group in the 90s called D-Light for that tune "Groove is in the Heart." That really cool bass line that Bootsy Collins plays, that's actually a Herbie Hancock bass line that they sampled from this movie. But anyway, it's and that really, so far we've talked about two songs that were already like very influential in the hip hop world, right? So oh, gotcha. Does anybody have any food we can give Kevin? I just feel like like a bagel or just like a little something to just kind of chew on back here. Okay. You do not want to see our group text. Anyway, where was I, Kevin?
I forgot.
Okay. So his influence on hip hop, from these old records, really started to kind of blossom in the 90s. But I knew him originally. My first iteration or understanding of who Herbie Hancock was of course from the breakdance phenomenon song "Rocket" from the 80s. That's all I knew of Herbie Hancock when I was a kid. I had like an old refrigerator cardboard box that I laid out on my driveway, and I tried to like do breakdance moves. There is no video evidence of this, John. Before you want me to give it a shot now? Okay. I had a really great. I could do like the backspin. Yeah, it was. No chance. There was no chance.
That's definitely extra.
Now it would be back break. It went from the back spin to the back break. I'm like, oh. So, but it's really interesting to see how almost every era of Herbie Hancock's music was able to relate to future generations. To this day, he's done stuff with Pink, with Kendrick Lamar, with Thundercat, and really his ability to create these really catchy melodies and create stuff that I think is indelible. Like no matter what generation you come from, if you hear some Herbie Hancock, you can relate to it, and that is a pretty unteachable skill. And it's one of the reasons why to this day he's still putting out amazing music. So when he finally comes back to writing, for himself again and writing more straight ahead or acoustic albums, his palette continues to grow. On his next record, it's another concept album where he's starting to get influenced by the civil rights movement. And one of the things that he takes away from what's going on is that he thinks the more we can be innocent and childlike, the more peace that we will have. So the entire record is based on that. Every song has something to do with being a kid or that kind of childlike innocence. And and instead of just having kind of this regular jazz setup, he starts to expand. He has 9 players on this album. There's a flute player and a French horn player and a bunch of stuff like that. It's a really beautiful album. We're going to play the title track from that album for you right now. It's beautiful. It's one of my favorite Herbie Hancock compositions. This is entitled "Speak Like a Child."
Buckle up.
All right, the easy stuff is behind us. Now it gets hard. You know it's bad when I have to think it through. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. So, beautiful song, very complicated, lots of, really more like
Sorry.
You want the microphone, Kevin?
Don't do it.
Of course, we're only acknowledging half the criminals here. Everybody over here on this section is encouraging Kevin. Enablers. Kevin Smith, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. It ain't me. So, as far as that sound, you start really pastoral colors, and to me, it really kind of reconnects. This album was about his childhood, about trying to get back to his childhood. So it makes sense that it has more classical and romantic sounds on the record, because that's where he started. He started at classical piano. So we hear some of those sorts of textures that we didn't hear on those first couple of Blue Note records. We start hearing that re-enter into his music during this time. And as he continues to travel with Miles and his own band, and his world continues to expand, and he runs into more people, the civil rights movement is going to continue to kind of be a vessel through his music as he tries to come to grips with what's all going on around him. And his last record with Blue Note in 1968 is reflective of this. The album is called The Prisoner. He feels like when he's out and touring and on stage and whatnot, he feels like this person who, everybody's applauding for him, and he's making all this money and he's traveling. But then at the end of the day, in his own country, he feels like there's still a struggle there that he's trying to fight his way through. But ever the optimist, ever someone who is trying to find the good in things, a lot of the songs on The Prisoner are optimistic, and we're going to play, this is my favorite Herbie Hancock composition. You're going to hear some of the same elements from the last song we played, but it's a beautiful tune dedicated to the great Martin Luther King Jr. It's simply titled, I Have a Dream. Thank you all so much. I Have a Dream off of The Prisoner in 1968. That's going to be Herbie's last Blue Note record. You can even kind of hear it in those two compositions. They're really starting to kind of stretch the boundaries of some of the earlier sounds that he had. And I think as an artist, sometimes you start along a path, and then you can kind of see that that path is running out, and you need to kind of do something new. So he's gonna get. He was signed, I think, to a 7-album deal when that deal ran out. He's going to take a break, kind of try and revamp and try to figure out what he wants to do next. He's going to put a few groups together. But one of Herbie's big things that he learned during this time, and I referenced it a little bit with Speak Like a Child, is he started to value meditation and just kind of, whatever that might mean to anyone, just to sit there and quietly, quiet the mind and just try to let things come to him, and really help kind of center him, particularly during this turbulent time. So while he's trying to figure out what he's going to do next, he's meditating on it. And he says he's sitting there and he's meditating and he's trying to figure out what his next thing is going to be. But he keeps getting distracted because this sound keeps coming into his ear and he can't stay focused. And it's the same thing over and over again. It just goes, "Thank you for letting me be myself again." And he goes, "I got it. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the music of Sly and the Family Stone and James Brown and all that, and I'm going to use what I know and put it on top of that. And I'm going to create a brand new band called the Headhunters." So that's really where this new concept comes from. We will, by the way, as Jazz Legacy Project, we will do the Headhunters at one point. One of the songs that he reimagined for the Headhunters, that was off of his very first record, we're going to play to kind of close us out. But please, before I go, please help me thank one more time Mr. John Sanford on the tenor saxophone. Mr. Justin Powell on the trumpet. The master himself, Master Louis Hurrivo. We call him the Hangry Man. Please help me welcome Mr. Kevin Smith. My name is Justin Barnes. We are the Jazz Legacy Project. Thank you so much for coming and spending your Sunday evenings with us. That is not something we take lightly. We really appreciate that you guys decided to come spend your evening with us. We're going to close out with probably his most popular composition, one that apparently he's being sued for at the moment. We're going to close it out with Watermelon Man. Thank you all so much, John, Justin, Lewis, Kevin. I'm Justin Barnes. Thank you so much. And now here's the owner of this establishment, Miss Tamara Fuller.
That was splendid.
Be careful, Kevin.
You all right back there, Kevin?
I got. Nobody panic.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We loved having you. And we'd love to have you again. You can find all of our upcoming shows at thevelvetnote.com. Don't forget, 2 weeks from yesterday is our 11th anniversary. And we're going to have a Legends of Jazz anniversary version on the 4th of June, featuring the music of Charles Mingus. Yeah. And there shall be cake. I believe in cake. Yes. This is what we love to do, which is to bring you closer to artists who inspire you, closer to each other, and closer to the song that's in your heart. Come and see us again. Good night.